So now we will be moving on to the next paper by Shri Arvind V Iyer ji. Its title is Hiding Brahmanical in the Study of Brahma-vihāra. Brahma-vihāra is a text, and the Indological studies on Brahma-vihāra is what Shri Arvind V Iyer is going to focus on. Over to you, Shri Arvind V Iyer ji.
Thank you, Nagaraji. Let me share my screen. Something good be Brahmanical, and can something Brahmanical be good? So this is one of the questions which I will be addressing, taking a different track from what my fellow panelists have been. We have seen how the term Brahmanical has been clapped on to something people don't like, which is patriarchy or oppression. What if there is something that people like, and there has been a historical association with the Brahmanical, but the association has been muted, has been hidden? And that is the topic here. Something people like is this bouquet of virtues, virtuous dispositions, which in Buddhist thought has been called Brahma-vihāra. So these are virtues of friendliness, kindness, feeling happy for others, and maintaining equanimity when things seem to be going wrong. So all of these are virtues nobody has complaints about. The term itself is Brahma-vihāra. So how come it's not spoken of as a Brahmanical virtue? So here it's more about unhiding what is Brahmanical in Brahma-vihāra. Let's begin with something that everybody agrees on is a virtue, one hopes, which is friendliness, maitri. Even in a very professional setting, some advice which HR folks give to people who have lots of reportees is be friendly, but don't be their friend. In that, we don't want any allegations of partiality or special favors to anyone, but maintain an overall friendly disposition. It's pretty much universally thought of as a virtue at all levels, at the level of individual relationships, at a much wider stage as well. In 1996, when Bharat Ratna MS Subbulakshmi delivered a concert at the United Nations, at the urging of the Paramacharya of Kanchi, the benediction, the song was Maitrim Bhajata, let's seek friendliness. More recently, in our century, Vaccine Maitri was the label, the hashtag for the mission where vaccines were provided by this country to neighboring countries. Of course, this trait has been prized throughout the lore since time immemorial. In the Bhagavad Gita, where we see two friends there, two of the most famous friends of all time, where when the traits of a bhakta are being listed, it goes Adveshta Sarva Bhutanam Maitra Karuna Evacha. There are lots of virtues that come, but Maitri features foremost. And it barely ever features in isolation. We want friendliness, but if someone is friendly with us, but hard-hearted otherwise, completely outraging on all issues, seems to show very little capacity for happiness or empathy, prizing here. We are talking more Krishna and Arjuna than Duryodhana and Karna, for example. So, Maitri in this verse itself has been hyphenated with Karuna. And historically, matrix of virtues, as I call it, where friendliness is prized along with mercy, along with joy at the good fortune of others. The word Schadenfreude, which is joy at the misfortune of others, has entered the English dictionary. but this is a quality spoken of in Indic literature called mudita, which is sympathetic joy. Upeksha is a dicier one. It's more to do with indifference, but it's about knowing what to ignore, about picking battles, not outraging all the time, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, these are familiar words. Many of us know women who are named Maitri and Karuna. We also know some muditas, upeksha not so much, but these are not unfamiliar terms. What might be somewhat less familiar is them being called Brahma-vihāra, all four of these taken together. Someone unfamiliar approaching this just via Wikipedia, or somebody in an American campus like I was for almost a decade, would be pointed to a source like this, where Brahma-vihāra is called a series of Buddhist virtues and meditation practices made to cultivate them. It's the same four. It is Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha in their Prakrit equivalents, Pali equivalents. And within this, Maitri, called Metta in Pali, is particularly emphasized. People in the overall meditation circuit, etc., would be familiar with these metta meditation retreats and so on. Now, this seems to be the introduction when somebody in a conversation like this is told that, well, actually, Maitri is a broader Indic idea which you just have encountered through this Buddhist funnel. You might get some looks of disbelief. This is Buddhist as against Brahmanical. Now, as the question I began with, can something Brahmanical be good? Let's look at the prefix Brahma, which in Sanskrit and other Indian languages, as we speak of Brahma Vidya and Brahma Jnana, etc., are associated with what is ultimate, what is great, and also to the extent that the Brahmana participated in this greatness and ultimacy, it was associated there too. There are words like Brahma Varchas, which is the splendor that Brahmana in good standing is supposed to show. There is also the term Brahma Hatya, not a good thing. My point in listing these is that the prefix Brahma has been applied neutrally, in that it can apply to good things, it can apply to bad things. Brahma Bandhu, which Sushumna ji also spoke about, is seen as some sort of an insult, in that he's a Brahmana not by conduct but only by virtue of having Brahmana relatives. So there's Brahma Nirvanam, ultimate liberation, which the Bhagavad Gita speaks of. There's also Brahma-vihāra. This term gained currency in Buddhist sources. We'll speak a little about that. So here, when we have Brahmanical instead, is there anything good and Brahmanical? There's Brahmanical oppression and patriarchy. Brahmanical ritualism might have been a good thing if meticulousness, devotion to detail had been prized, like the Protestant work ethic is praised. But the Brahmanical ritualism, not so much. Brahma-vihāra, which these virtues, everybody agrees on are virtues. The Buddhists also choose the name Brahma-vihāra. Can we call them Brahmanical virtue? That is one of the questions here. And I will be addressing in this by asking, is there a basis in Astika literature and traditions? As Nagaraj mentioned in the introduction itself, Brahmanical seems to have crept in when what was meant is Astika as against Nastika, Brahmana as against Shramana, which are Jains and Buddhists. So is there any basis in Astika literature and traditions to support application of the Brahmanical category to the Brahma-vihāra virtues? And what next, if there is? So the organization of this talk accordingly has 4 parts. One is how Maitri, etc., are treated in Yoga Shastra. Yoga is an Astika Darshana, as against an Nastika Darshana like Buddhism in the classical classification. Then Itihasa and Purana, a class of literature widely accessible, widely read, are Maitri, etc., covered here. Passingly, how associated are they with the Brahmana or with the Brahma is going to be the major part of the talk. I'm going to step out of the shadow of Buddhism. The idea is to unhide. Away from the shadow of Buddhism, we are going to turn the gaze to the light that both the Buddhists and others might have been drawing on. However, we'll also address the shadow amid the Shramanic and Brahmanic literature, if we are to accept the distinction, how Maitri, etc., feature there, and most importantly, what next in the here and the now. Even if we say that it can be called Brahmanical, then what? There are 2 sutras in the Patanjala Yoga Sutra which are particularly relevant here and have been posted here with 2 translations. One with Rama Prasada, very textbook level on everybody's shelves, which is very terse and direct, and Shri TKV Desikachar, founder of the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, who explicates, provides context, and translates simultaneously. So at first, Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha in yoga come at the level of preparation. They also come at the level of perfection in yoga. It's not something that finds just a passing mention. One sutra occurring in the Samadhipada itself goes, Maitri Karuna Mudito Pekshanam Sukha Dukkha Punya Punya Vishayanam Bhavanatas Chitta Prasadanam. So a few things noteworthy here are that it is recognized there is a time and place for all of these virtues. A clear mapping is given of when to cultivate and when to deploy, if I may use the word virtue. It's not all about outward expression. It's about bhavana. If tomorrow the student who sat on the same bench as me in my kindergarten classroom wins a lottery ticket, for example, I need not post it on Instagram or go dance in the street. What matters is the bhava of feeling genuinely happy for him. So bhava is a term which I won't translate, but it has facets of feeling, intent to bring about a realization experience of something. All of these bhavanas in their respective situations are supposed to aid in chitta prasadanam, which is the refinement of the mind for purposes of this talk. It's not the ultimate goal of yoga, which is chitta vritti nirodha and abiding in the self, but this is preparatory. It's something to go on the side all along. Going to Desikachar as to when each of these Brahma-vihāra virtues, as we call them, are applied. Maitri towards those who are happier than ourselves. Karuna, compassion towards those who are unhappy. A sympathetic joy with those who are doing praiseworthy things. And being undisturbed, upeksha here, by the errors of others. These habits, they contribute to clearing the mind. There is another sutra there which occurs in the Vibhuti-pada, and it's put here for a reason, in that metta meditation, Maitri meditation, is frequently marketed as something Buddhist. Now, is there something like meditating on Maitri here as well? We saw on top, the sutra on top talks about deploying it as a response in the flow, in the course of life. What about meditation? The third, the Vibhuti-pada, speaks of the experiences or the special powers a yogi can get by performing sanyama on particular objects. Sanyama here is exclusive, uninterrupted concentration with a single focal object. Now, here, what is spoken of is Maitri, etc., as objects of meditation. How Desikachar puts it is different qualities such as friendliness, compassion, and contentment can be inquired into through Sanyama. Thus, one can learn how to strengthen a chosen quality. Suffice it to state just two takeaways here. One is that there is a Maitri meditation that is in the Yoga Darshana, Astika Darshana, and also that there is no Sanyama on Upeksha. It's somewhat like asking which TV channel is the off button in the remote control. Upeksha, indifference, is about absence and abhava of bhavana in the right context. The yoga commentarial tradition exquisitely deals with these Brahma-vihāra virtues. The focus is on bhavana, as I mentioned. And just to emphasize the point that none of this is just a coincidental mention, some virtue listing that people can read and then carry on outside of their and forget outside of their yoga studio. That is not the deal. The term which appears in the Vyasa Bhashya, the closest commentary to the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, is parikarma. What is parikarma? It is a work that is not the center staged primary task, but tasks around pari that are indispensable to it. If it is cooking, if you're making something special like panchamrita or payasana, it is no less important to do the usual steps of cleaning the place before and after, watching the stove, boiling the milk, etc. If it's classical dance, for instance, the stage design, the makeup and the lighting, all of this is parikarma. A lovely Tamil term for this is chuttuvele, work that is around. So, Bhojaraja, one of the commentators of the Yoga Sutra, his commentary is called the Rajamartanda, is the same Bhoja of Bhojashala fame. He, for Indian knowledge systems enthusiasts, he says parikarmas are like the basic operations of arithmetic, plus, minus, multiply, divide, for the mathematics. That is how important Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha are. The Vyasa Bhashya clarifies, it clearly maps where these are expected. Maitri, when you see someone who's happy; Karuna, when you see someone who's sad. You feel joy when someone is doing the right thing, irrespective of whether they are happy or sad at this point. Punyatmakeshu mudita. You feel, you ignore when you see somebody doing something vicious. There are other commentators, Vachaspati Mishra, the polymath who has commented on sutra texts across darshanas. He has a more detailed and colorful way of giving the application of Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha. He says all of these, when adopted correctly, they remove certain kinds of mental dirt called kalushyam. Envy of the success of others goes when we practice friendliness. Desire to harm others goes when we practice compassion whenever someone suffers. Envy of attainments, irrespective of whether they're doing well at this time or not, whether they're practicing virtue, this kind of not being able to bear that goes when we practice sympathetic joy. And impatience goes when we settle in indifference. Sadashiva Brahmendra, whose Yoga Sudhakara is another commentary on the Yoga Sutra, he also a figure in Vedanta. He is a Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya. he joins more dots for us. Maitri, which Vyasa Bhashya says is applied when people are enjoying pleasure. He says it will prevent raga, Sukhanushayi raga, of course, for Yoga Sutra enthusiasts. It prevents attachment because somebody else's happiness is also mine. The self-other distinction keeps bearing, so it prevents raga. Similarly, when the self-other distinction has worn down, karuna prevents dvesha or aversion, and also these conceits of, oh, that person is suffering and I'm doing great. And similarly, here is an important tip of sorts that Sadashiva Brahmendra gives. If we keep practicing sympathetic joy, if we associate joy with somebody else doing the right thing, it inclines us, incentivizes us to do the right thing itself. And similarly, if we make it a habit of ignoring when somebody is doing the wrong thing, that will eventually disincline us towards God. So I hope to show in just these two slides how an Astika Darshana, like the Yoga Darshana, has Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha, not coincidentally, but as a parikarma for advanced practitioners, also as an object of Sanyama. But what about those other than yoga practitioners? What next? Will it take us all the way to Swarga or heaven? What about the goal of moksha? What about commoners, in a sense? And most importantly, what about this question of Brahmanical, which I'm supposed to address? For that, I'll go to a selection of Itihasa and Purana texts, mostly Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam. One representative Itihasa, one representative Purana. Maitri, how important is Maitri? Now here I'm not talking about just friendship in a tactical or strategic sense. The Panchatantra will have a lot to say about that. And also Mahabharata, which what is in it is nowhere, what is not in it is nowhere, right? So it has a lot on strategic and tactical Maitri as well. But here we are talking about this higher order of Maitri towards all beings, and in no less a context than the Uma Maheshwara Samvada in the Anushasana Parva, which Dr. Sushumna Kannan also mentioned via translation in the morning. There is a conversation where Maheshwara answers Uma's query on who deserves Swarga, who gets to go to, for want of a better term, heaven in the first place. Now, whenever there is a trait which is considered a qualification for heavenward ascent, in some traditions outside of India, the qualification would be accepting a certain individual as the final messenger of the Almighty. In another tradition, it might be accepting some other individual at another point in history as one's personal Lord and Savior, and so on. Now here it is striking how often Maitri, this friendliness, shows up as a qualification for ascending to heaven. Throughout in these three verses assorted here, the refrain is Te Nara Swarga Gaminaha, Te Nara Swarga Gaminaha. Those men, they ascend towards heaven. Now, what sort of men? And in all of these verses, there is an emphasis on Maitri. Ritam Maitrim Prabhashante Tenara Swargagamina. Those who speak what is true and they promote Maitri. Bhajanti Maitra Sangamya Tenara Swargagamina. And not friendship just towards people favorably disposed to them. Shatrum Mitrum Cha Ye Nityam Tulyena Manasa Naraha. So this is an illustration of how important Maitri was in terms of the afterlife as well. Swarga, fine. What about the so-called higher order of liberation? Something like Brahma Prapti, Brahma Nirvana. Here also there are a number of examples we can find in the Mahabharata, where Maitri, a person whose Maitra is emphasized a lot. So I will read the final one. The rest are similar. कामान आत्मनि संयम्य क्षीण तृष्ण समाहित सर्वभूत सुहृन् मैत्रो ब्रह्मभूयस्स गच्छति. So here we talk of someone attaining the highest state possible, and Maitri is emphasized even there. One might have assumed, coming at this as an outsider, that if a person is that close to liberation, has probably left all ties behind, and this liberation is a one-person, one-off affair. But that does not seem to be the case. However transcendent the liberation that is spoken about, it is spoken of for a Maitra who practices Maitri as always. There is this notion of Jivan Mukti in Vedanta, where a person is as good as liberated in the here and now. And that seems to be what is spoken of in the first verse on the slide. Maitrotha Shila Sampanna Susahaya Parashchaya Muktascha Vividhai Sangai Tasya Pretya Mahatphalam. The Mahatphalam, the greatest fruit that is there, is attainable by someone who practices Maitri while not being attached to anything else. Perhaps the core of this presentation can we call Maitri, etc., Brahma-vihāra, a Brahmanical virtue based on Astika literature. The Mahabharata provides us with an embarrassment of riches. I need to restrain myself to put a few representative examples just in a Sthali Pulaka manner. So the first example may leave someone doubtful whether I just got lucky, because it is this is a case where an Apsara Varga, who somehow gets on the wrong side of a Brahmana with lot of tapas, is about to be cursed, and says that, oh, this being devoid of Maitri, cursing, etc., is unbecoming of you. It is in that context that the first verse occurs. Sarva bhuteshu dharmagya maitro brahmana uchyate satya bhavatu kalyana eshavado manishina. So maitro brahmana uchyate, here someone who has Maitri, who is a friend of every creature, he is one who can be called a Brahmana. Here might have been, someone might come out and say, if I just present that verse, that it's out of convenience. Of course, you want to say that to make that Brahmana feel good. But this Maitro Brahmana Uchyate, Maitri as this very defining fundamental quality of what makes a Brahmana, it comes throughout the Shanti and Anushasana Parvas, unironically spoken of as a virtue during very serious discussions. Very identical looking verses, one by Bhishma to Yudhishthira and Vyasa to Shuka. Here we can see one of them. Parinishtita karyastu swadhyayeneva brahmana kuryad anya nava kuryan maitro brahmana uchyate. So here we see a nice juxtaposition of what is the classic textbook tradition of what makes a Brahmana, which is study of the Vedas. And that is spoken of as indispensable, something that cannot be substituted for with anything else. But even there, the qualifier Maitra attaches itself to a Brahmana. Just like someone on the verge of liberation too has this quality. Someone who has the Veda, the most important thing, also is spoken of as having this quality, suggesting how important it must have been in Mahabharata times. Brahmane darunam nasti maitro brahmana uchyate acharya sarva bhutanam shasta kim praharishyati. Cruelty, severity, it is said to be totally out of character, unbecoming. Even here we find Maitro Brahmana Uchyate. That should suffice, but here I should pause and uh, make this very important point that Maitri is not spoken of as an exclusively Brahmana quality or a quality just for Brahmanas. For this, I will take the aid of some of my wonderful colleagues at the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, where one principle that is followed always is that practice, whether it is asana, pranayama, yoga practice is super important for teachers. Anyone who's teaching, anyone who's being an instructor should have practiced that day, should have this history of routine practice, should have a record of practice, and so on. Now, when they say that the teacher's practice is important, even if I walk down the corridors in Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, that's what they say. Oh, it's important for a teacher to practice. Does this mean it's not important for a student to practice? Not at all. In fact, emphasizing practice for the teacher is a way of emphasizing practice for the student, for the latest beginner as well. So, similarly, a Brahmana who is in this very central leadership role of an exemplar, how that role was arrived at a particular time in history, let's set aside that question now, whether it is Janmana, Karmana, whether by birth, conduct, or by some complicated mixture of both. Someone has been in the role of an exemplar with certain obligations. And for somebody in that role, Maitri has been emphasized, just like practice of yoga has been emphasized for teachers at the KYM. So this itself would say that all of these verses seen here, Maitro, Brahmana, Uchite, they are meant to drive home the importance of Maitri as a Sarvabhauma, as a universal virtue, rather than just a Brahmana quality or a Brahmanical virtue. And just to add some examples from the Mahabharata itself, where it's not that Maitri is just for people at the very advanced stage of Brahmanirvana or for Brahmanas alone. There's a very striking verse here which I've included for several reasons. Maitra krurani kurvanto jayanti swargam uttamam. Dharmya papani kurvanto gachanti paramam gatim. It might seem shocking at first, where Bhishma tells Yudhishthira that someone who's a Maitra, someone who has Maitri, they get heaven even if they do acts of cruelty. Righteous Kshatriyas who do even Papa karmas, they get the highest ends. Now here, some context is important. That the very next verse is about conditions of when a Brahmana can take up arms, notwithstanding Varnashrama dharma, etc. But let's part this thought that once Maitri is secured, that even if there are apparently cruel acts elsewhere, even if there are these doshas, these shortcomings, it is not held against somebody who's a Maitra. There is another instance of a conversation between Tuladhara, literally scale bearer, who true to his name has a provision store of some kind, who speaks to a Brahmana called Jajali. So here too, this verse doesn't say anything new except that it is an example that says Maitri has been emphasized universally. Now, one objection from a scholarly perspective might be you started talking about Brahma-vihāra, you've spoken only about Maitri so far. What about Karuna? What about Mudita? What about Upeksha, etc.? We do find examples even in the Mahabharata. The very first Bhagavad Gita verse we saw in the very opening slide, and that already hyphenates Maitra and Karuna. Regarding Upeksha, though this is a bit of a 20-second digression from the thrust of the talk, it's fascinating, and though I would like to share this. Duryodhana tells Dhritarashtra, the gods attain to their divinity by the absence of desire, covetousness, of enmity, as also their indifference to all worldly affairs. Akama dvesha sanyoga droha lobha cha bharata upekshaya cha bhavanam deva devatvam. It is through this upeksha, indifference of all such notions of kama, dvesha, droha, lobha, and so on. That's how even the devas in Swarga became devas in the first place. Now, again, Duryodhana is saying this, and he's saying this in a context where Dhritarashtra is scared that, oh, so many of these devas, Indra, etc., are allies of the Pandavas. What will become of you? And Duryodhana says this out of convenience. But the words taken in the right spirit, even if he meant it in the wrong spirit, so to speak, is interesting to see. After all, Duryodhana also said, Janami dharmam nachame pravritti, janami dharmam name nivritti, kenapi devena hridisthitena yatha niyuktosmi tatha karomi. It may seem self-serving, but there are people who actually use that verse as an invocation. So that's one example here, just to show that other complements of the Brahma-vihāra complex are also in the Mahabharata. This is a slide I will skip, except for the remark that we saw in Yoga Shastra that that Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, they are all applied in certain contexts. There's a time and place for those. And we had Vachaspati Mishra and Sadashiva Brahmendra tell us how particular vices are countered by this. So here, Karuna particularly as a remedy, it has been spoken of as a remedy for Asuya. It has been spoken of as a remedy for Atmano Manam. Which is in line with what Sadashiva Brahmendra said in that Darpa, these self-conceits go when Karuna is practiced. So much for the Mahabharata. Ramayana, the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam also has numerous references to Maitri, Karuna, and the rest. I have chosen 3 verses, one in the Kapila Devahuti Samvada, another in Narada's instruction to Dhruva, and one in the Navayogendra's conversation with Maharaja Nimi of Mithila, occurring across Kandhas. And all of them, they are also very closely in the spirit of what the Vyasabhashya and the Vachaspati Mishra's Tattva Vaisharadi and Sadashiva Brahmendra's Yoga Sudhakara have said about how to match the columns between people and events in the world and Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha. I'll read one verse, the others are similar. Gunadhikan mudam lipse, anukrosham gunadhamat, maitrim samanad anvichen, natapair abhibhuyate. Every man should act like this. When he meets a person more qualified than himself, he should be very pleased. When he meets someone less qualified than himself, he should be compassionate towards him. When he meets someone equal to himself, he should make friendship with him. So here the exact words may be different. If I do a naive keyword search, we wouldn't have found it. Instead of mudita, we have mudam lipse. Instead of karuna, we have anukrosha. So Maitri is Maitri, of course. Where is Upeksha, you might ask, but the very preceding verse before this in Narada's introduction to Dhruva, it talks about Upeksha to one's own difficulties in the world, etc. It is that slightly different track, but these correspondences here, they suggest that the yoga tradition, the Puranas, etc., these are not stray occurrences. There is this framework. So this is just a table to say. It's not identical, but I guess you would agree they are in a similar spirit. I'm not going to read this slide, but I have just put it because we'll talk about Shramana traditions next. And when the Bhagavatam speaks about Rishabhanatha, the Tirthankara in the Jaina traditions, in this prose passage, they talk about him being Maitra Karuniko Dharmartha Yasha. So it's there. The Mahabharata has supplied most of the content for what I set out to prove. We cannot forget Rama, and there is one verse whose importance cannot be overestimated. That kind of steals the show. I might have, if I had just 2 minutes to give the talk, I might have use just this one. This is during Vibhishana Sharanagati, said to be the final message of the text in traditions like Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, etc. Mitra bhavena sampraptam natyajeyam kathanchana dosho yadyapi tasya syad satam etad agarhitam. So Mitra Bhava, let's not be pedantic and let's take Mitra Bhava to be Maitri that we have been seeing all along. We saw that dramatic verse of Bhishma to Yudhishthira, that people with defects, people with cruelty as well, when they have Maitri, they can ascend to the heavens, they deserve the highest good. That is an assurance in Valmiki Ramayana, no less. And in the final few sections, I will address Shramana literature, beginning with a Jaina text called the Tattvartha Sutra. A Jaina, not Buddhist, Sanskrit Sutra text, very like the Yoga Sutra. The first sutra up there, it has the Yoga Sutra I quoted at first. The second is from the Tattvartha Sutra, Maitri Pramoda Karunya Madhyasthyani cha Sattva Gunadhika Klishyamana Avinayeshu. So here again, the terminology is a little different. Instead of Mudita, we have Pramoda. Instead of Upeksha, we have Madhyasthya, somebody who is not on either side. Tatasthata, Tatasthya is one other term we see in such contexts. So here again, there's guidance about whom or where to apply those two. So to see things come together, we have in the yoga tradition, we have in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Tattvartha Sutra, friendliness is for everyone. Karuna is for those who are Klishyamana, who are suffering from kleshas, these afflictions. Mudita is for those who have greater virtue, very much in line with everyone else. And Upeksha, the ones who are to be ignored, are those who are avinaya, those who are unled or indisciplined. I have to address the Buddhist shadow. I said that I would rather focus on the light that shines on both the Shramana and Brahmana traditions. It turns out that the Buddhists themselves, including the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, did not speak of Brahma-vihāra as something invented by the Buddha. In fact, the Buddha himself speaks of Brahma-vihāra as an inherited practice, and he contrasts it with his own, almost like how in the Upanishads, Karma Kanda inherited, which is important, but then there is Jnana Kanda ultimately is spoken of. The Buddha, historical Buddha himself seems to have spoken of Brahma-vihāra that way. Similarly, this gets even more interesting. There are these narratives of Pratyeka Buddhas in Buddhist lore that of previous incarnations of the Buddha. And anybody who, even the Buddhists think, historically preceded the Shakyamuni Buddha in teaching Brahma-vihāra like content, they must have been incarnations and so on. So the notion that Brahma-vihāra Maitri is a Buddhist notion which is not Brahmanical, which often circulates at the level of Wikipedia, can be disposed of at the level of Wikipedia itself. What now? I mean, Atha Maitreyadaya. In the Indic traditions, whether it be yoga or Vedanta, we want to come back to the here and the now, not get lost in this infinite regress of citation rings or issues of dating and chronology and so on, which have their place. Atha, what now? If I have convinced you somewhat, there is an Astika basis to speak of Maitri and Brahma-vihāra as Brahmanical virtues. Should I put a new badge on my social media pages saying there's open for Brahmanical friendship or something? For this, I will go for guidance to two contemporary sources. So far, it was very classical sources. This will be my penultimate slide. Here, so far, I quoted from primary sources, plunging in. Here, there are two from contemporary discourse. There are two very different folks. One is a European academic, Dr. Konrad Els. Another is literally a Dashanami sannyasi, Pujya Sri Swami Ramanacharana Tirtha. And for this whole notion of Shramana versus Brahmana, Buddhist versus Brahmanical, I found what they had to say really helpful, and I will share a little bit of that here. Some of it is what I had thought of myself earlier. Brahmana is not a pejorative throughout in the Pali canon. The final chapter of the Dhammapada, which happens to be the longest chapter, is devoted to what a true Brahmana should be per Shakyamuni Buddha. Now, I mean, it's a category he wanted to preserve and appropriate, it seems. Dr. Konrad Els says that the historical Buddha going on saying Esa Dhammo Sanandano, what he's teaching is Sanatana Dharma, itself belies claim of foundership. He acknowledges that there was stuff before him, even if Indologists don't. He also says original sources don't support the view that Siddhartha left his teachers in disgust in some way. And also, Sri Ramanacharana Tirtha, in one of his discourses, he spoke of the cordial relations that yatis of the Dashanami Sampradaya and also any other traditions have with Buddhist monks or Jain monks. They have a lot in common in terms of their yati dharma. Ahimsa is important for all yatis. His way of saying it was there are shared modes of sadhana despite divergences in Siddhanta on notions of where the world that we see came from the ultimate, how it relates to Ishvara, etc. There are divergences in Siddhanta, of course, but the shared basis in sadhana needs to be borne in mind always. And in real life, in terms of relationships among yatis, etc., it is a lived reality. I will leave you with this question, and the answer I would say is yes, but for the what next, I am not going to say yes, we need to carry placards saying open to Brahmanical Maitri, Brahma Maitri, Brahmanical friendship. Because as I said, with the example of my teachers at KYM, Maitri, a trait that is emphasized in the Mahabharata for those in the role of Brahmanas as exemplars, is a universally aspirational trait, regardless of antecedents. At the level of debate, discourse, I hope we have accomplished what we set out to do. That yes, we have Maitri in the yoga traditions, in the Bhagavata Purana. It is important and not just passing. It is important for the attainment of Swarga and ultimate liberation. And the ways in which it is important are not irrevocably in a divorced way different from the Shramana traditions as well. With that, I thank you for your patience. Apologize for overshooting the time, and I leave you with Krishna. Om Tat Sat. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind ji, for an elaborate discussion on the Brahma-vihāra, whether the very title Brahma-vihāra has the Brahmanical aspect in it, and what should have been obvious to people from the title itself actually is not discussed very much, but you brought in the details from Yoga Sutras, Yoga commentarial literature, Mahabharata, Itihasa, all the evidences. And towards the end, there was this indological discussion by Coenrod, Elst, and others. Let me check if there are any questions. Not specific questions on the Brahma-vihāra topic. So I think thank you very much. So